Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Don't forget to subscribe to receive more stories every day. Sarah blinked, struggling to grasp the weight of the situation as her husband's words echoed in her mind. "There's nothing left for you here," he had said coldly, his eyes fixed ahead as he almost shoved her out the door. Her heart felt numb, her mind a blur, her hands gripping the tiny fingers of her newborn daughter, Ellie, who lay peacefully in her arms, completely unaware of the chaos surrounding them. Abandoned, heartbroken, and overwhelmed, Sarah had nowhere to turn except her parents' old, weathered house on the outskirts of town. The drive to her childhood home felt longer than she remembered. The house stood at the end of a winding gravel road, surrounded by tall oak trees swaying in the autumn breeze. The house felt both like a sanctuary and a prison, holding onto fragments of her past and painful reminders of everything she had left behind. It groaned and creaked as if it too mourned her losses. She had never imagined returning here, certain that her life was securely built on the promises and dreams she and her husband had once shared. But those promises had turned to dust in an instant, leaving her with nothing but a suitcase, a newborn baby, and an overwhelming uncertainty. As she stepped inside, the scent of cedar and dust filled the air, thick with memories of family gatherings, quiet evenings by the fire, and the sound of her parents' laughter. Sarah swallowed hard, her emotions tangled in a mix of nostalgia and sorrow. This house, once full of warmth and joy, was now her last refuge. She took in the details that had faded over the years. The chipped wallpaper, the worn carpet, and the echo of her footsteps in the empty halls. As days turned into weeks, Sarah slowly began to find a rhythm. Though the weight of starting over was exhausting, her days were filled with caring for Ellie and maintaining the old house, which had been left in neglect for years. Each time she fixed something, a loose floorboard, a leaky faucet, she felt a small sense of accomplishment, a reminder that she was capable of holding things together, at least for her daughter. But as Sarah continued with her repairs, she began noticing odd markings around the house. They were faint, almost imperceptible, tucked away in the nooks and crannies of the house she had once known so well. At first, she dismissed them as nothing more than random scratches, the usual wear of an aging home. But the more she saw, the more a peculiar curiosity grew inside her. There was something deliberate about these marks, as if someone had carefully etched them over time, with a purpose long forgotten. One late night, while Ellie slept soundly, Sarah found herself standing in the kitchen, staring at faint markings on the wall near the pantry door. Moonlight streamed through the window, casting a silvery glow across the room, making the markings visible just enough for her to recognize a pattern. They were symbols, strange, intricate, and hidden, almost as if designed to escape casual attention. She traced them with her fingertips, a chill running down her spine. What were they? Could it be a forgotten message? The next morning, Sarah's curiosity overwhelmed her. She spent the entire day searching every room, every corner, looking for more of these strange symbols. They were scattered throughout the house, in the basement, hidden behind picture frames, faintly carved into the backs of shelves, etched along the walls of her father's old study. The markings seemed to form a map of sorts, a path that led from room to room, each mark pointing to the next, like a trail of breadcrumbs. Her heart pounded with both excitement and fear. What had her parents been hiding, and why had they gone to such lengths to conceal it? Sarah felt as though she had stumbled upon a secret world, a puzzle that only she could solve. Then, one evening, while sorting through the attic, she came across an old leather-bound journal. It was filled with her father's handwriting, scrawled in the margins with notes that hinted at hidden treasures, family secrets, and cryptic instructions. Her hands trembled as she turned the pages, realizing that this journal was the key to unraveling the mystery concealed within the walls of her childhood home. Sarah pored over the journal late into the night, her heart racing with every page she turned. Her father's handwriting, slanted and faintly faded, felt like a connection to the past, his words reaching across time with an urgency she couldn't ignore. His notes spoke of a great responsibility, of a family legacy that was hers to discover. But it was his final entry that truly took her breath away. "To my beloved Sarah, if you're reading this, it means I've entrusted you with a fortune beyond measure. It's more than gold. It's a piece of our family's history, something to protect and cherish." Fortune. Her father had never been wealthy. He worked long hours in construction, his hands rough from labor, his clothes practical and worn. How could he have left behind a fortune when he had lived so modestly? The words felt like a riddle, urging her to dig deeper, to challenge everything she thought she knew about her family's past. The following morning, Sarah set out to follow the markings, determined to see where they would lead. She started in the basement, where the marks were faintest, hidden behind an old cabinet covered in dust and cobwebs. Moving it aside, she discovered a loose panel in the wall. Her fingers tingled as she pried it open, her pulse quickening. Inside, she found a small compartment containing a map. Its edges were yellowed and brittle, yet the ink remained sharp and vivid. The map detailed the house and its surrounding land, with several points marked by small X's. As she studied it, Sarah felt an overwhelming sense of pride swell within her. Her father had been preparing this for years, meticulously hiding clues throughout the house, waiting for her to uncover them. She couldn't help but wonder why he had kept it hidden, why he hadn't shared it with her when he was alive. But now it didn't matter. She had found it. She would honor his legacy by following the trail he had left. Over the next few days, Sarah explored each marked location on the map. Some were easier to find than others, but every discovery made her heart race with excitement. In the attic, she uncovered an old chest, its wood polished and sturdy, thick with dust. Inside, wrapped in faded linen, were small ornate boxes, each one containing pieces of her family's past. Jewelry, documents, photographs. Among them, she found letters her grandfather had written to her grandmother during World War II, filled with his hopes for their future and dreams for their family. The chest seemed like a time capsule, preserving memories and secrets that had been long forgotten. But the map hinted at something even bigger, a final X, located in the backyard, near the old oak tree where her father had often sat, watching her play as a child. As she followed the map's instructions to the tree, Sarah felt a rush of emotion. The tree, with its deep roots and thick branches, had silently witnessed her childhood, her parents' lives, and everything she had once taken for granted. She knelt down, carefully digging at the base of the tree, her hands moving the soil with reverence. After a few moments, her finger struck something solid, metal, heavy, and secured with a small lock. She carried it back to the house, her mind racing. This was it. Whatever her father had wanted her to find, it was inside this box. With trembling hands, she unlocked it, revealing a collection of gold bars, each stacked neatly and gleaming in the dim light of the room. Her breath caught as she realized the magnitude of what she had uncovered. This wasn't just a modest inheritance, it was a small fortune, carefully hidden away. Her father had left her a wealth beyond her imagination, something that would secure her future, and, more importantly, Ellie's future. The realization brought tears to her eyes as she thought of the sacrifices her father must have made to keep this hidden for her. Just as Sarah was coming to terms with her newfound fortune, there was a sudden knock on the door, shattering the silence. Sarah froze, her heart racing. She hadn't expected visitors, and few people knew she was living there. Slowly, she opened the door, only to find her ex-husband standing on the porch, his eyes narrowed and his posture rigid. "Sarah," he began, his voice a mixture of forced calm and arrogance. "I heard you're living here now. I think we need to talk." A wave of anger surged within her, but she kept her face neutral, hiding the whirlpool of emotions churning inside. He didn't know about the gold, she was certain of that. But his presence, here at her lowest point, was a painful reminder of everything. She had long since lost track of the betrayal and hurt he had caused her. "Talk," she replied, her voice steady but cold. "After everything you've done, I don't think there's anything left to say." He smirked, his eyes scanning the house with an air of curiosity. "It's just, I heard some rumors," he said slowly, trying to mask his true intentions. "About some assets your father might have left behind." Sarah's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her composure, her mind racing. Had someone spoken about the inheritance? Had he somehow uncovered the gold? The thought sent a chill through her, but she refused to let fear take hold. "What do you mean, assets?" she asked, feigning ignorance. "My father left me this old house. That's all." Her ex-husband's eyes gleamed with intent. "You know as well as I do that your father wasn't a simple man. He kept his affairs private, didn't he?" I think there's more here than meets the eye, and I deserve my share." The audacity of his words left her speechless. After abandoning her, he now had the nerve to come here and demand what her father had left her. The sting of betrayal burned through her, but beneath it, a fierce protectiveness for herself, Ellie, and the legacy her father had entrusted her with took root. "Whatever you think you know," she responded, her voice firm, "it's none of your business. You left me, remember? You lost any right to this family, to anything my parents left behind." Her ex-husband's expression hardened, his eyes narrowing. "I still have my rights, Sarah," he said, his voice low and threatening. "And I'll fight for what I believe is mine." The threat hung in the air, heavy and ominous. But Sarah wasn't the woman he had abandoned. She had faced hardship, rebuilt her life, and uncovered the legacy her father had hidden for her. Now, standing in her parents' house with the weight of their sacrifices behind her, she felt an inner strength she had never known. With a calmness she hadn't expected, she looked him directly in the eye and said, "Then go ahead and try. But know this, I won't let you take what isn't yours." The tension between them was palpable, the silence thick as he glared at her, his face twisted with anger. But for the first time, Sarah felt a resolve that could not be shaken. She wasn't going to let him intimidate her. This fortune was hers to protect, and she would fight to keep it. She watched him storm off the porch, his threats still lingering in her mind like an ominous shadow. Despite the encounter, a sense of clarity washed over her. For so long, she had been at the mercy of others, her ex-husband, her circumstances, and even her own self-doubt. But now, for the first time, she had the means to protect herself and Ellie, a chance to build a life free from his influence. In the days that followed, Sarah focused on securing her newfound independence. She quietly researched ways to safeguard the gold, consulting banks, meeting with attorneys, and ensuring that everything was securely held in her name and Ellie's. She created a trust, outlining every detail carefully to make sure her ex-husband would never be able to claim what wasn't his. With every signature, every notarized document, she felt the weight of her past slipping away, replaced by a new sense of freedom and control. But Sarah knew better than to lower her guard. Her ex-husband had a way of showing up when she least expected it, like a shadow that refused to disappear. Sure enough, one evening, she heard the unmistakable rumble of his car pulling up to the house, headlights cutting through the dusk. A mix of irritation and dread coursed through her, but she steeled herself. She was no longer the vulnerable woman he could manipulate. Opening the door, she met his gaze with unwavering resolve. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice icy and firm. He stepped forward, trying to act charming. "Came to talk," he said smoothly, though there was a sharpness beneath his words. "I understand you may not be ready to forgive me, but I thought I could help you out, maybe support you and Ellie." Sarah barely suppressed a scoff. "You abandoned us, remember? And now you want to play the role of the helpful ex-husband." His mask of politeness slipped, and he narrowed his eyes. "I know about the gold, Sarah. I don't care how you found it, but it's half mine. You can't just pretend I don't have a right to it." A cold shiver ran down her spine, but she kept her expression neutral. So he knew. Whether he had guessed or heard it from someone else, it didn't matter. The greed in his eyes confirmed all of her worst fears. He would stop at nothing to claim a piece of her father's legacy. "What part of you lost any rights don't you understand?" she snapped, her voice cold and unyielding. "You walked away. You wanted no part of us. That doesn't change just because you see dollar signs." His face twisted with frustration, and for a moment he seemed ready to argue. But then, a slow, sinister smile spread across his face. "You think you're so clever, Sarah, but I've got lawyers, friends, people who can make this very difficult for you." Her heart raced, but she stood tall. She wouldn't let him intimidate her into surrendering what was rightfully hers. "Then do whatever you have to," she shot back, feeling a surge of defiance. "But know this, my father left that fortune for me and Ellie, and I'll protect it with everything I've got." He glared at her for a long, tense moment before muttering under his breath and storming off to his car. As his taillights disappeared down the driveway, Sarah felt a wave of exhaustion but also of fierce pride. She had stood her ground, refused to back down, and she wasn't about to give in now. In the weeks that followed, Sarah remained alert, knowing her ex-husband might try to follow through on his threats. But as time passed, she became more comfortable in her new life, embracing the home she was building for herself and Ellie. She poured her energy into her father's property, turning it into a sanctuary, a place where Ellie could grow up surrounded by love, stability, and the legacy of a family that had always cared for her. One crisp autumn morning, Sarah decided to visit the local historical society to learn more about her family's history. As she sifted through old records, she came across an article about her father and grandfather, describing their humble but impactful lives in the community. The article praised her grandfather's dedication and highlighted her father's quiet generosity, funding scholarships and supporting families in need. Sitting there, her heart swelled with pride. The fortune her father had left her wasn't just about wealth, it was about preserving the values he had lived by: integrity, humility, kindness. Sarah knew that her role wasn't just to protect the gold, but to honor the spirit in which it had been entrusted to her. Months later, just as the first snow began to fall, Sarah received an unexpected letter from her ex-husband's attorney. Her hands trembled as she opened it, fearing another attempt to claim her inheritance. But as she read, her eyes widened in surprise. The letter was a formal apology, stating that her ex-husband had withdrawn his claims to her inheritance and agreed to a permanent separation agreement, waiving any rights to Ellie or the family's assets. Apparently, after a failed court case, his claim had been dismissed due to lack of evidence and public interest. He had been humiliated, and realizing the battle was lost, he finally gave up. A profound sense of relief washed over Sarah. She was free from his control, from the manipulation, and from the insecurity he had burdened her with. She looked at Ellie, who was playing nearby, her laughter innocent and joyful, and a surge of hope for the future filled her heart. With her newfound fortune, Sarah established a charitable foundation in her father's and grandfather's names, dedicated to supporting single mothers and struggling families. The foundation quickly grew, its impact spreading throughout the community. She received heartfelt letters from women across the country, sharing how the foundation had given them a second chance, just as she had found her own. Years passed, and Sarah watched as Ellie grew up in a home filled with love and warmth, a stark contrast to the life they had left behind. She taught her daughter the values her father had instilled in her, creating a legacy founded on compassion, resilience, and gratitude. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. We'd love to hear what you think. Share your thoughts with us.